Internal turmoil within the Green Party of Canada is ultimately what led its former leader, Annamie Paul, to step down after the 2021 general election campaign. Interim leader, Dr. Emmy de Kuttner, has led the party ever since then. They have been instrumental in ensuring a successful leadership campaign, but now some internal turmoil is that back on the rise again. Party President Lorraine Reckmans has stepped down, or is that a personal decision? And also, where does the Green Party of Canada go from here? Joining me now to discuss just that is Sarah Gabriel-Barron. She is a candidate for the leadership of the Green Party of Canada. Good of you to make the time. Let's start out with that piece that I mentioned in the first part. A lot of Canadians, they hear the Green Party and they think about some of that internal turmoil that was in the lead up to the 2021 election, a lot of back and forth between the leader of the party and the National Council. How can you, as a party, and what would you do as party leader, do to ensure that when Canadians hear about the Green Party, they don't necessarily always go to thinking of that internal turmoil that took place?
Mostly we just need to be positive and keep going forward. Our party is founded on the concept of grassroots politics, so a decentralized power structure. And that really does kind of not marry well with the kind of system that we're in right now, which is you have to play the game by the game's rules and generally requires a hierarchical power structure. And so that's not unique to the Green Party of Canada. That's something that Greens have experienced since our movement's inception. So I believe that the way forward is to more and more be true to a decentralized power structure, to a collective member-made policy process, to concepts like direct democracy, and to showcase that to Canadians. And I believe that that's really important now more than ever, Wyatt, because the climate crisis requires it. We have a real problem with democracy in our country right now. The Doug Ford government just got in with less than 40% of voter turnout, 100% of the power with 17% of the popular vote. That's not democracy. So we have a crisis in democracy. And the Green answer to that fundamental philosophical problem in our society right now is direct democracy, grassroots democracy. So that looks like, in my platform, it looks like the electoral district associations having more power in this structure of the party. And it looks like a real honest approach and a commitment to a member-made policy process.
But can you really do that when you have instances like the party president resigning, not necessarily given a reason why? And obviously, we won't speculate as it relates to that. That's for them to decide and for them to make the announcement if they wish as to why they decided to do that. But a lot of people, when they hear the resignation of the party president, think about that internal turmoil. And that's one reason that a lot of people have kind of speculated. So how can, and putting the party president aside even, there was a report that came out that suggested the two party MPs were suggesting that they would leave the party caucus if the party leadership race had been paused. So how do you put all of that aside? Obviously, what you're saying, a lot of your party's or a lot of your party policy that you would implement if you are elected as party leader, which I'm sure a lot of people are listening to and they are in favor of that. But does it go beyond policy? How can you actually do that if, as many people would suggest, the Green Party isn't as united as it should be?
Well, it's a phenomena that exists throughout the left, throughout socialist organizations and organizations everywhere, that when we feel like we're not succeeding, we can turn inwards and start to blame each other.
But would you, I guess, be willing to acknowledge that some of that internal turmoil, and obviously not, pertain to anyone specific, it seems to be an issue that again led up to the 2021 campaign, and that report suggested involved the National Council. Obviously, to a large extent, it is a private matter, as some Greens have.
Federal Council. Yeah, the Federal Council. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, the Federal Council. So we have a leader's office, we have a federal council, and then our judicial wing is the Ombuds and Appeals Committee. So I think what we're getting at is that to have a healthy democracy, and any healthy democratic institution, you have to have basic separation of powers, right? Judicial, legislative, and executive. And when you have such a small family like we have in the Green Party, we end up wearing many different hats. So many Greens are on their executive, and sometimes they step down as president so they can run as a politician, and then they go back to being president in their constituency association, and they're involved provincially and federally. And so within that, like I was saying, that fishbowl of the Green Party of Canada, of people who have taken on, leadership roles within the organization, they can forget that they have to stay in their lane, right?
Right.
And so I don't want to say, oh, power corrupts, because what's going on in the party right now, there have been some serious breaches of ethics, and it's not up to me to pronounce judgment on them. We have to work it out together. And we have to work it out in a way that remains true to our basic key principles: nonviolence, social justice, participatory democracy. And like I said, the tension is that we also want to win. And that means that hierarchical, top-down approach is the way that this game is played. And my belief is that those two ways can't be at loggerheads anymore, that we have to be good at both. And that's why I'm proposing that my leadership style for the party will give credence to that grassroots member-led structure. But I will still, when I am the face of the party in the media, having interviews with you, people like you, Wyatt, I will give the membership the credit for the work that they're doing in their communities, for the work that we do collectively around policy creation.
A lot of Greens have, no, obviously the Green Party won fewer seats in the last election than it did in 2019. They won Kitchener Centre with Mike Morris, and Elizabeth May was reelected, but they lost Fredericton. Obviously, Jenica Atwin had crossed the floor just prior to that election campaign. They did not re-win that riding. There was a lot of polls too that showed that they could have potentially won Nanaimo Ladysmith Paul Manley's riding. He was unsuccessful in winning re-election. Would you be willing to acknowledge that perhaps some of that was related to some of the internal stuff, or do you think there could be another blame put onto that? What do you think was the reason, and how can you move forward from that election campaign to ensure that in the next election, if you are elected as leader, you can elect more MPs?
Yeah, it was definitely directed to Annamie Paul's leadership style. That hurt us. And when her chief spokesperson, Noah Zatzman, made that tweet, Green MPs, we will work to defeat you, that Jenica Atwin, and I'm sure the other caucus members, did feel attacked by their leader. And it caused a domino effect that was on display in the media. And that was what pulled us away from our green ideals, and it turned us into humans, for one thing. that our inability to get along with each other at that hierarchical, institutional, higher up level was on display for the nation, and it was hurtful to the movement. But this is a global movement. And like I was saying earlier, the members who are that foundation of the Green movement will never give up. We'll never give up. And even if we have some internal squabbles that put on display our need for better infrastructures that aren't part of the system that exists now, that are true to Green political philosophy, we need to be true to that different way of doing politics. And I think then we will succeed. And that's what my leadership is about.